Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Mets Daily on the Fan Arts Network. John Saponaro here with you today and every day to talk about our New York Mets. And before we get started, of course, a special shout out goes to our friends over at Kalshi. For a limited time, you can use the code FANARCHBASEBALL on Kalshi.com or the Kalshi app to get 10 when you trade 10. All I can do is exhale when I talk to you guys about the way this Mets game went down. And when I look at the landscape of this team, when I look at the gauntlet, the timeline that I myself threw down when we first started this journey together on Mets Daily, when I took over for Jake Brown just at the start of last week, all I asked for from the Mets, all I asked you as viewers to be patient for was 1 month's time. Let it unfold. Let the Mets show that what they did in April and what they did in some parts of May was not who they really were. And would they make the playoffs? I'm not sure, because the hole was so deep, and digging out of it, even with 3 wild cards, even with the fact that so many teams into September have opportunities to make the playoffs now, as we saw last year with the Mets, with the Reds. I didn't know if it was going to end that way. I didn't know if it was going to end with the ultimate positive, but I wanted a reason to buy in for the month of June. Why? Because I'm a Mets fan, and because I'm a baseball fan, and because baseball seasons are long. Baseball seasons last for 6 months. And when you enjoy baseball and you wait for baseball, and the fact that there may not even be baseball, or not baseball as we know it, in 2027 because of a looming lockout that we don't have time to talk about today, but I'm sure we'll spend plenty of time on in the future. When you look forward to this game, when you look forward to this season starting, you never want to see a season die as quickly as the Mets are trying to put this season to rest. But the other part of it is completely self-serving. The other part of it is completely selfish, and I admit it. It's because I started doing this show on June 1st. I told you on that first day that, yeah, for the last 5 years, I've been doing a weekly Mets show, and that show is wonderful, and that show has continued to endure, and that show is different, and that show is fun in a different way. But I wanted us, you the viewer, me the host, to get off on a fun foot. Not to say that we would ever get off on the wrong foot. I don't think that was going to happen, but I wanted us to get to know each other through the positivity, through talking about fun baseball, stuff that's interesting, stuff that really matters in the middle of the summer, stuff that you can look back on at the end of the season and go, yeah, what a great move. I wanted what we talked about in these first few weeks together to matter for the 2026 season. I didn't want it to matter because we have to talk about sellers and the Mets get, prospect A for player B. I didn't want it to be about that, because I didn't want our first month together to be about 2027 and beyond. Do I think the Mets are in a good position organizationally for the future? I do. Some of that feeling has been shaken a little bit because my faith in the likes of David Stearns and his front office has been shaken. I have absolutely no confidence in Carlos Mendoza, although I think that's going to take care of itself because I don't think he'll be here beyond the 2026 season. Let's not forget his contract is up at the end of the year. So whether they fire him or do they decide to move on, I don't think that's going to be an issue. But I think that my feeling about the brain trust of this team from the owner on down, my feelings of positivity have been shaken. But despite that, there is talent here in the players. And I think there's enough competence that the future is brighter than it is dark. But I didn't want to talk about the future on June 10th, June 11th. I didn't want to talk about the future in week 2 of my hosting this show. I wanted to talk about baseball in 2026. And when I put that self-imposed timer on this team and on this season of June, I did it with a disclaimer. I said that, well, that timer doesn't last till the end of the month if the Mets don't win more games than they lose. And right away, the Mets are not holding up their end of the bargain. The Mets have now dropped 2 in a row to the Cardinals. The Cardinals make it look easy. The Cardinals have won the series. They've won the season series. And like we talked about on yesterday's show, at some point, however far-fetched, if the Mets were going to make a run at the third wild card, it doesn't really matter how many games out you are if every team in front of you has the tiebreaker over you. At some point, you have to start to beat the teams that you are chasing. And the Cardinals are one of those teams. And now the Mets have made sure that they can't have the head-to-head tiebreaker with the Cardinals. And so if it comes down to percentage points, there is no more game 163. There is no more playoff before the playoffs. Like we saw last year with the Cincinnati Reds. The Mets just tuck their tails in between their legs and they go home for the winner, and another team goes and plays October baseball. And that's going to be so tough to swallow in back-to-back seasons where your team comes off of an NLCS appearance, where your team pushes the great Dodgers to a 6th game, goes out, signs Juan Soto, and every year since then gets worse. It's going to be tough to swallow, but that's where we're headed. I hate to say that to you, but that's where we are quickly heading. We are rolling down the hill right now towards that. Talk about this game a little bit, I guess. 9-2 is the final. And I tweeted this during the game, nearly the exact same game as the day before. And for times throughout the game, the score was the same. The score was the same at the same point. Yeah, Mets chip away a little bit. They get 2 runs on the Alvarez home run. Great. That's great. We'll talk about Alvarez in a little bit. But the deficit is still the same. The day before, the Mets lose 7-0. Last night, the Mets lose 9-2. 7 runs, never in doubt. Making another mediocre pitcher, this time in Andre Pallante, looking great. 6 innings pitched, 2 runs, 5 strikeouts, 2 walks. The guy barely allowed any base runners. He gave up the long home run to Alvarez, and that was it. They made him look great. And like I said in the series preview, this is a mediocre starting pitcher. People a little bit younger than me would say he's mid. And they made him look great. He dazzled. He stood them on their heads. And the most telling part for me was something I didn't even know going into this game. They talked about it on the broadcast on SNY. Coming into this game, Pallante had a 9 ERA in the first inning. 9 flat. Now, I know they say this about great pitchers. If you got to get them early. Otherwise, you never will. And Pallante is certainly not in that category. He's not a great pitcher. But when a guy has a 9 ERA, that means something's amiss. The Mets have a guy, David Peterson, who we'll talk about in the next segment, who was doing so poorly in the first inning that they had to deploy an opener to get him out of that first inning, to get him away from the top of the lineup and the best hitters one extra turn through. And the Mets aren't the only team, of course, to deploy that strategy. But that's how bad Pallante has been. 9 ERA in the first inning. Didn't matter. Mets never stood a chance. And in some ways, I know the Mets scored 2 runs and the day before they didn't score any, but in some ways this game was worse. The Mets actually had less hits. 2 runs came on 1 massive swing from Alvarez. Alvarez has that home run. That's his only hit. Beatty adds a hit. Jared Young adds a hit. That's all. And again, I told you on day 1 that I would not lie to you. Yesterday's game, I turned it off again. 2 games in a row that I did not make it to the final out because I knew what was going to happen. Now, for the first game of this series, I turned it off after the 5th inning and I didn't really miss anything. I think I saw all of the scoring. I may have missed an extra hit or two. This game, yeah, I missed the Cardinals tack on 2 runs. So what? What am I going to do? Sit through that? Why would any of us want to sit through that? Not when in the same city, and I know this is not the point of this show, but not when in the same city, the New York Knicks execute what is one of the most spectacular comebacks you will ever see. The largest comeback in NBA Finals history, down 29 late in the third quarter. In the fourth quarter, with like just under 8 minutes to play, they had a 0.5% chance of winning that game. They come storming all the way back on a play that will live forever in New York sports history from OG with that tip in with 1.2 seconds on the clock. So with all of that happening at the same time or thereabouts, in the same city, hell, in the same color uniform, why would you care about the New York Mets and what they're doing? Because they're not giving you any incentive to care about what they're doing. And I'm not even a big NBA guy. I'm not a big basketball fan like that. I want the Knicks to win because I'm a New Yorker. I've always maintained that New York's a basketball town. New York's a lot of different things as far as its identity goes, but New York's a basketball town. And as a result, New York is better. New York City is more fun when the Knicks are good, and damn, the Knicks are good. But did you think that I wanted to do a show called Mets Daily and spend any time, let alone, I don't know what it's been, 2 or 3 minutes talking about an NBA team? Outside of maybe, hey, they're on one hell of a run, outside of a sentence or two. But that's where we are. That's what the Mets have gotten us to. And it's frustrating. And a big part of it was that their strategy didn't work. Their strategy blew up in their face. It looked like it was going to be Christian Scott pitching today. It was announced that it was Christian Scott. Then the Mets make the change. We touched on it briefly at the end of the show from yesterday. They decide to give Scott a little extra rest. He's now going to pitch in the game today as they try to salvage another series. I feel like a broken record. The Mets try to salvage a series. They wanted to give him extra rest, probably because he's a young pitcher, probably because he's coming off of the injury. Giving him extra rest allows them to give Nolan McLean extra rest, who, again, another young pitcher, dealing with some ups and downs, dealing with a little bit of turbulence for the first time in his major league career, his short major league career. On the surface, giving those 2 young guys an extra day is not crazy. Sean Manaea also picks up an extra day, and again, the way that he's pitched and the odd kind of schedule that he's been on, where he was a bullpen guy, he was a bulk guy, he's a starter, he's an opener, he's a this, he's a that, and now the Mets need to get something out of Sean Manaea. Giving him an extra day, also on the surface, doesn't seem crazy. But we talked about it yesterday. I told you I did not like that. I did not like that as a strategy because the Mets cannot afford to play for tomorrow. You cannot afford to risk losing a game because you decided to go with a worse option than the option that was presented right in front of your face. Now, look, the Mets didn't really hit. So if Christian Scott pitches, do the Mets win this game? Maybe not. Probably not. Because I don't think 2 runs is going to get it done. But you can't bank on the law of predetermined outcomes. You don't know that if Christian Scott pitches that he's going to give up, 6 runs the way that David Peterson did. Or that he's going to start the first inning giving up a couple runs the way Austin Warren did. And so you don't know if maybe the Mets take better at bats. And again, I'm not blaming this. Their offense has been horrendous all season. So I'm not going to blame the offense on the exploits of the starting pitcher. But again, the offense knows they have a lot of work to do. And when they know they have a lot of work to do, they shrivel up. And I don't know if it's pressing. I don't know if it's squeezing the bat too hard, if it's trying to have a Mets moment, if it's trying to be the savior. I don't care what cliche it is. Maybe if Christian Scott pitches, nothing changes, the Mets lose. But maybe they don't. And what the Mets did last night is that they ran out a plan and a pitcher and a strategy that was worse than the one that they were planning on doing from the beginning. And it cost them a game. And they cannot afford, I hate to keep saying this, but they cannot afford to give away wins. They squandered that opportunity when they lost 12 in a row. And then they squandered it further when they lost 7 of 8, effectively destroying all of the goodwill that they had built back after going on a nice little run after the 12-game losing streak. Losing 7 of 8 basically put them right back at square one as if none of that winning happened. And the only thing that mattered was the 12-game losing streak. And amidst that, you have David Peterson, who is horrendous. He gives the Mets 3 2/3 innings, 6 runs on 7 hits, 2 walks, and a strikeout. That is about as bad of a line as you could have. This guy is unplayable right now. I've never been a big fan of Peterson. Even when he was going great, I didn't believe in his stuff. Even when he was going great, I didn't believe in his makeup. It's not to take anything away from his career. He had an all-star first half last season. He deserved that. In the Mets playoff push in 2024, he was electric out of the bullpen. Thank you very much, sir. We will remember you fondly in 20 years for those 2 seasons or those 2 moments. The rest of David Peterson's career as a Met has been largely ineffective. And I'm so tired of watching him pitch. I'm so tired of watching him sag his shoulders. 3 2/3 innings pitched, 6 runs on 7 hits. Brutal. Absolutely brutal. And again, the plan didn't work. The opener strategy blew up in their face. And I don't really want to dump on Austin Warren here because Austin Warren has been one of the few bright spots for the New York Mets. Austin Warren has thrived. Austin Warren was good last year, and he was a victim of the taxi squad. He was a victim of having so many options, send him up, send him down, fresh arm, he's in, he's out. But when you looked at his time spent with the big league club, it was really good. And this year, that kind of cemented his role. He had a bad outing today. It happens. But as an opener, he's been great. Coming into the game later on, he's been great. Austin Warren has had a really good season. He didn't have a good day today. And I know the way that the Mets are hitting right now, getting down 2 runs early feels like the death knell. But realistically, it wasn't. 2 runs in the first weren't. And if you want the game to play out the same way, if you think the game will play out the same way, well, the Mets got those 2 runs back eventually on the swing from Alvarez. So Austin Warren did not bury the Mets this game, despite the fact that he did not set a great tone to start, of course. 2 runs in the top of the first, a lot of pitches, a lot of traffic. That's not good. But David Peterson buried this team, make no mistake about it. 3 2/3 innings, 6 runs, 7 hits. 2 walks and a strikeout, not fooling anyone. He buried this team. Absolutely buried this team like he has done so many times before. And again, the most frustrating thing for me is that the Mets had a plan. They had Christian Scott announced, and they decided to change. And I did say this was a possibility. I think it was on last week's show, maybe on Friday. I mentioned it, that the Mets were going to need a starter definitely by June 13th, but maybe as early as the 10th if they wanted to give some of these guys extra days. And I even said I don't know if I would do it. But on the flip side of things, I did say I wouldn't reach into the minors. I would go with an opener and David Peterson if you really wanted to give them an extra day. Because part of me knew that's what they were going to do. I would have just started the guys on regular rest and tried to give myself the best chance to win every single game possible. They didn't do that. They went with what I thought was the best of a group of bad plans. They could have gotten Jonah Tong, which I didn't think they were going to do. He's not been good. They could have gotten Zach Thornton, which I thought maybe they would do kinda. He's been fine. And then, of course, both of those guys pitch a couple days ago, making them not available, making it moot. But when we talked about it on Friday, I was like, I wouldn't do that. Speaking of moot points, I was like, I'm not going to Kodai Senga. He winds up being still injured, having a setback, getting shut down, not getting shut down, whatever. So all of those other options became moot. And when they had no other options and it came down to David Peterson with an opener or just pitching two of your best pitchers back to back on regular rest, they decided to go with the worst possible choice. And it bit them. It bit them, and I don't feel sorry for them. Baseball season is here, and now you can trade every game on Kalshi. As I tend to do, I went on the Kalshi app right before I clicked that record button. And this is the first negative one I'm going to give you. But it's because I want you to do something. I want you to feel good. So there's a slider for over under on the Kalshi app. You can select over 1.5 runs, over 2.5 runs, over 3.5 runs, 5.5, and so on and so forth. And each one of those has a different percentage attached to it. And I think the most interesting one is over 2.5 runs for today's game, New York Mets, St. Louis Cardinals. Over 2.5 runs for the Mets. If you say no, and you take the under, that's at 45 cents a share. And the Mets have done nothing to instill confidence that they are capable of scoring any kind of runs. I know Hunter Dobbins is a bit of a wild card here because we don't know what he is. He doesn't have a lot of big league experience. What he is a talented young pitcher with a good fastball, and I think that's going to give the Mets fits. So, over 2.5 runs, if you think no, 45 cents a share on the Kalshi app. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there is no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. For a limited time, you guys already know, download the Kalshi app, use the code FANARCHBASEBALL to get $10 when you trade 10. Kalshi, trade on anything. Must be 18 or older. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risks and may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. Trying to find a bright spot here to talk about in this game because I don't believe in doing 30 some odd minutes of doom and gloom. And so we'll talk about Francisco Alvarez, the fact that he is back, the fact that 2 games ago he gets a base hit in his first at bat, and here today last night hits a monster 2-run home run. Didn't matter, didn't factor in to the game really at all. The game was firmly out of hand at that point. But it is nice to see a young player work his way back. Yesterday, we talked about the gutsiness. We talked about his want to. Yes, the body has to be able to hold up. He seems to heal incredibly quickly, but he also has the determination, the grit, the want to get back and be with his team and be a contributor. And we've seen that from Alvarez time and time again over his brief MLB career. And you got to give him credit for wanting to get back out there, wanting to play, wanting to be with the guys, wanting to be in front of fans, wanting to make a difference. And when he gets out there and he hits this home run, you see the upside, you see the value still show. This is a team that is starved for power, and Alvarez has power to spare. I know he's not had a season like the 25 home run rookie campaign since that rookie year, but it is in there. And the Mets, 2026, 2027, pick your year, whatever, they're going to need a player like Alvarez. And I know some of you are sour on Francisco Alvarez, and I just want to tell you why you should not be. Because Francisco Alvarez, fairly or unfairly, whether you agree or not, whatever the case may be, his value gets graded on a curve because of his position. So unlike Mark Vientos, especially, or even to a lesser extent, a guy like Brett Beatty, who does have some value, who could play around the diamond, or conceptually Ronnie Mauricio for a little bit of the same. Being a catcher, Francisco Alvarez is always going to get a boost. He's always going to get graded on a curve. He has a different kind of value because of the positional value that he offers. The catching position is so important. If you have a catcher that is even capable, that you even think might be able to hit you 25 to 30 home runs, that is something of a unicorn in Major League Baseball. You want to hold on to that guy. He doesn't have to live up to number one prospect in baseball, top catching prospect in the sport hype to be a valuable member of your team. His age, his position, his power potential, even if you dismiss the upside, are still valuable. 24 years old. He also gets Sanger off the roster, which we talked about on yesterday's show. Hayden Sanger, good guy, good story, good defensive catcher, not a major league hitter. You cannot hide your backup catcher on the bench. They have to play 1 to 2 days a week minimum. The Mets have a great backup catcher in Luis Torrens. Hayden Sanger cannot be on this team. So the people who say, "Oh, I'm so happy Alvarez is gone," you shouldn't be. Alvarez provides value. Hayden Sanger provides nothing. Now, going forward, it seems like the Mets, at least in the short term, probably because of Alvarez coming off of the knee surgery, are going to do a little bit more of a 50-50 split between him and Torrens in terms of getting starting catching opportunities. I think you're going to see a lot of what we saw in last night's game, which was Alvarez DHing and Torrens catching. I think that's fine. Let's not confuse it. Torrens is not a great hitter, but Torrens has value, especially defensively. And if you do it that way, if you deploy the roster in that manner, you kind of are getting the best out of each guy. Again, I don't need to force feed Luis Torrens at bats, but his defense is top tier. His defense is elite. We know Alvarez struggles in that department. And maybe Alvarez can be a bit of a better hitter or a more consistent hitter if he doesn't have to worry about calling a game. Maybe. We'll see. So for those of you who say Torrens is better, I think you're wrong. I think you're misguided. For those of you who say Torrens should play more, or at the very least, Torrens should play more catcher, and Alvarez should be just a hitter, I said yesterday I was willing to entertain that. I still am. And whether it's because of the injury or anything else, that's what the Mets are going to do for at least the next little bit. And remember, MJ Melendez, who is on this roster, is sort of a hybrid between your standard emergency catcher, a guy who could throw on the gear and kind of get through it, and a true third catcher on the roster because he did come up as a catcher. So I think the Mets are in a position where it's smart to DH Alvarez some and get Torrens behind the plate, knowing that if something were to happen, you do have MJ Melendez as an option that you can go to. One place where the Mets are running out of options is in the rotation. The rotation is, as the headline says, in disarray. Blinked, and the rotation went from being a strength, being a positive, being the thing keeping the Mets in games, to being an absolute problem. And the problem is, Freddie Peralta has had too many blow-up games. In the games where he is 5-inning Freddie or fastball Freddie or whatever, Brewers Freddie as advertised, he's been fine. Doesn't give you the length that you'd want, but, he goes 5 innings, gives up 3 runs or less. You take that. In the modern MLB, you take that. Gives you a chance to win. But he's had a lot of blow-up games. He's had a lot of games where he gives up over 3 runs and over 4 runs. Now, all of a sudden, he's a guy you can't rely on. Well, okay, what about Nolan McLean? Nolan McLean burst on the scene last year, looked like a rookie sensation, had a couple really good starts to start the season. He's hit a little bit of a skid. He's hit his first little rookie bump in the road. So he goes from a guy that you were hoping could take the next step. And again, the book on this season isn't closed. He still can, and I believe he will. And I think he's got great stuff. And I think he's going to be a wonderful pitcher for a long time. But right now, he's not really a guy you can rely on, is he? So there's your 1 and 2. Peralta, can't really rely on him. It's different, but McLean can't really rely on him. Clay Holmes goes down, freak injury. He was your best guy, your most consistent pitcher. He's gone. So, obviously, can't be relied on. Sean Manaea, who the hell knows what Sean Manaea is right now? But he's thrust into a position of prominence. David Peterson, we spent a couple minutes talking about him. He's horrible. It wasn't that long ago when Sean Manaea was horrible and unpitchable. He's bounced back from that, but who knows what you're going to get out of him. Add to the fact that right now, David Peterson can only pitch with an opener. I've said a million times that I think Sean Manaea needs a traditional start because I don't think the Mets can continue to run out this opener strategy. You're seeing that come to fruition, how that's going to be a problem. But right now, both of those guys have an opener too. So not only do you not know what you're going to get, or the only thing you could bank on if you had to pick is that they'll be terrible, but they also have an opener in front of them. So you're also wasting bullpen arms. You're wasting ammunition to start a game. Not great. Not something you can rely upon. And where does that bring us? It brings us to Christian Scott, former top pitching prospect in the organization. And he's been really, really good, and he deserves all the credit in the world. He is super talented. He's pitching with confidence. He looks good. Did a segment on him the other day, how much he deserves credit for all of the work that he's put in, coming back from that Tommy John surgery, dealing with the butterflies and the confidence issues, dealing with the quirky not getting a win for forever, finally getting 2 in a row. He deserves all the credit in the world. But I'm not ready to rely on Christian Scott. And I don't think the Mets are ready to rely on Christian Scott. And I don't think they should. And I don't think it's fair to him. It might not be fair, but that's where we are. And look, even if Christian Scott is great, even if he's the guy he's been for the last handful of starts, and he is that guy for the rest of the season, how long is the rest of his season going to be really? Because he hasn't pitched before the start of this year in like a year and a half. So even if he becomes, maybe through just, you have no other choice, the guy you have to rely upon, how long can you expect to rely upon Christian Scott? Through no fault of his own. And so this rotation is in disarray. And I think that's why, more than anything else, despite the fact that the offense has been the biggest culprit all season long about why this team is so horrible, the starting pitching was keeping them afloat. The starting pitching was keeping them in games. The starting pitching was giving them a puncher's chance to win a game 1-0, to win a game 3-2, to win a game 2-0. If they don't do that, if the starting pitching doesn't offer that as an option to this offense, they're not going to win a lot of games at all. The St. Louis Cardinals have proven, however unexpectedly, to be a pretty good baseball team. They're not great. They're pretty good. They're certainly better than the Mets. But in a couple days, the Mets are going to face a real baseball team. The Mets have to face the Atlanta Braves for the first time this season. And I know Acuna went down, so they'll miss him. It's not going to matter. The Atlanta Braves are the best team in the National League, not named the Dodgers. And this year, the way they're going, Atlanta, that is, they might find themselves before the year is over being the best team in the National League. Now, I don't know if they'll beat the Dodgers. I don't know if anybody can beat the Dodgers, whatever. We could talk about that plenty in September and October. But right now, I feel like the Mets are going to run into a buzzsaw. So we talk about salvaging a series with today's game. The Mets might have to salvage their existence before they face the Atlanta Braves. That's going to do it for this episode of Mets Daily. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, sitting at just over 4,000 subscribers as we continue to grow with a goal, 5,000. We'd love to get to that number, and we would love for you to be a part of it. Till next time on Mets Daily, I'm John Saponaro. See you tomorrow.